As a real estate agent, when we have new buyer clients, one of the first things that we have to do is sit down with them and discuss what a typical offer looks like so that they understand the terms that they need to make decisions about. That way, when we find that perfect home, they're ready and prepared to write an offer. So one of the first things, or the obvious things, that a buyer needs to decide on when writing an offer is, what is the purchase price going to be? What's the offer? The next thing that a buyer generally has to decide on is, what is the escrow period going to be? Is it going to be a 30-day escrow, 45 days, 60 days? Or if the buyer and seller are both able to do it, could it be a shorter escrow, like a 7, 14, 21-day escrow? So that's the next thing. In addition to that, the buyer is going to outline in the offer what their initial deposit or earnest money deposit is going to be. That is typically somewhere around 1 to 3%, and that particular deposit is wired into escrow very early on in a transaction, and then that money is applied towards the buyer's closing costs and their down payment for the home. The next thing that the buyer is going to outline in the offer is, how are they purchasing it? Is it going to be a loan or is it cash? If it is in fact a loan, we need to go a little further and outline the type of loan that it is. Is it conventional, FHA, VA, or some other type of financing? And then what is the interest rate or points kind of attached to those loans? The next thing we might ask for in an offer is, does the buyer need to ask for assistance from the seller for any closing costs? So if the buyer in fact did need some assistance for that, we would ask for that in the offer. The next big section of an offer is, what are the timeframes going to be for what we call contingencies? So there are a number of reasons for a buyer to have to sort of exit the transaction and still be entitled to that earnest money or initial deposit back. And so we attach timeframes to each of those. There is an inspection timeframe, there's an appraisal timeframe, and there's a loan timeframe. And so the next part of the contract will sort of outline that the buyer has 17 days to kind of accomplish all of these things. And there's some other contingencies as well, review of seller disclosures and review of some reports with respect to the home that they're buying. But that next section of the contract is really kind of about timeframes. The next section, or the next thing that buyers need to be aware of when writing up an offer, is who we're asking to pay for the different fees associated with selling and buying a home. And so we have things like escrow fees, title fees, transfer taxes, and things along those lines. And so we have a whole section where we're deciding and assigning kind of who's paying that, buyer or seller, or both, okay? And then the next big section where we're sort of, going through terms in a transaction is really about outlining sort of those personal property items in a home that can lead to sort of some confusion. So a perfect example would be appliances. We typically we have buyers who think that, every appliance in the home, the refrigerator, the washer, the dryer, is automatically supposed to stay with the house, but that isn't necessarily the case. And so our contract needs to very clearly state and specify which of those items are staying and which of those items are going. And it can go further to things like ceiling fixtures or things like that, although those are supposed to generally stay. If you had a seller who expected to take a very fancy chandelier with them, then you would want to stipulate things like that in an offer, right? So we want to be really clear in the offer and make sure that everybody, both buyer and seller and both agents, all fully understand the terms that each side has agreed to. So those are kind of typically the most common terms that buyers need to sort of decide on when writing an offer. And there can always be additional ones that kind of pop up that may be unique to individual houses. But that's the basics. For more videos about buyer and seller series questions, please visit our YouTube channel at Kristen Gutierrez Real Estate.